tomorrow. So we're going to be following the latest developments tomorrow and bring you the very latest on what we learn.
Now to some breaking news. Protests and heated debate at the state capitol this afternoon as a trio of immigration bills received votes on the House floor. It is part of a sweeping legislative package that top Republicans say is aimed at making Tennessee the toughest state in the union on illegal immigration. WSMV investigative reporter Stacey Cameron joins us now live from the Capitol. Stacey, despite this controversy surrounding these bills, they're really on a fast track, right, to becoming law?
Well, Jimmy, you know that's right, because in the case of two of those bills, the most controversial ones, there were several Democrats with their hands up wanting to speak out against these bills today, but Republicans, they cut debate short and quickly took votes on those bills, passing both along party lines. Now, before debate on the House floor began, there were protesters outside the chamber protesting largely against two bills sponsored by House Republican leader William Lamberth. His first bill would make it illegal to stay in Tennessee or come here if a person has a final deportation order from the federal government or they've already been deported or denied entry into the U.S. Now, Lamberth's second bill, that's the undocumented students bill. It requires students to provide documentation of their citizenship or immigration status when enrolling in public schools. An earlier version would have allowed schools to charge undocumented students tuition, but that got dropped. And one of the most heated debate points here today was over how much this law might cost local school districts going forward.
Why would we spend $55 million when we already know that all kids have the right under our Constitution to attend school?
I hear that 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot, including the 55 million you just stated.
Now, if both of those bills end up becoming law, they'll be first of their type in the union. Right here in Tennessee, we'll start that. But they have to move over to the Senate first, and that undocumented student bill already passed earlier in the Senate last year. And then just moments ago, the House passed a third immigration bill. This one would require state governments, local governments, and counties to verify people they hire have legal status to work in the U.S., and that would also include schools. Reporting live from Capitol Hill, I'm WSMV4 investigative reporter Stacey Cameron.
Okay, Stacey, thank you.